So, in lecture number one and lecture number two, we've dealt with the basics of market failure with the cost benefit analysis. And in lecture two, we had our discussion on the types of externalities, both positive, negative in consumption and in production. So, there were four cases. But market failure doesn't end there. There are more types of market failure. So, once we've done the background of it, now let's just go into the various types of market failures. Okay. So, the first one, obviously, which we've already dealt with, is externalities. And we've seen both from the consumption and the production point of view that externalities are the impact on the third party, completely unrelated to the transaction. Okay. And the market failure is that producers or consumers, they are only looking for themselves, and so they ignore the third party effects. Okay, and that's where the government is required to step in to deal with these externalities. Okay, so a lot more longer discussion has been dealt with on this topic. The second type of market failure that I want to introduce right now is about market power. In the market, in the market system, you have some imperfect situations like monopolies and monopsonies in labor market. Now, the thing with monopoly that we have dealt with is that monopolies are price makers. Why are they price makers? Because they have the power to decide what price they want to charge. Normally, what we've learned is that on the basis of demand and supply, on the basis of demand and supply, this is the quantity where perfect competition would produce. So I'll write MC equals to supply, but this is limited to perfect competition. I have cleared this situation before also, that MC curve will be only in perfect competition situation because it's the industry that we're talking about. QO is the quantity in perfectly competitive market and PO is the price you're going to charge. However, in case of monopoly, they are basically looking at MR and MC. So we're going to cross it halfway through. This is our MR. And so as a result, this is what monopoly is going to produce. And this is the price they are going to charge. Okay. So what's really happening is there is a market failure because in perfect competition, consumer surplus is 1 plus 2 plus 3, whereas the producer surplus is 4 plus 5. ठीक है, where are my areas? 1 2 3 4 and 5. So this is what consumer surplus and producer surplus areas are. Area below the demand curve above the price becomes consumer surplus, and area above the supply curve and below the price becomes producer surplus. Now when you talk about monopoly, this changes. Now the price has gone up to P1. So area below the demand curve and above the market price, this becomes the new consumer surplus, just area 1. Whereas the producer surplus, area above the supply curve but below the new price, the price is up there at P1. So all of this 2 and 4 becomes the producer surplus. But this is not where the problem is. Market failure is happening because of this area 3 and 4, which was initially part of consumer and producer and as a whole to the society. Now, this area 3 and 4 is gone to the deadweight loss, which is lost to society. And so we say, कि ये देखो, market failure, it is creating a deadweight loss, so it has to be dealt with. Okay? So that's our second case. Market failure is that when monopolies come into existence, they exploit consumers, they produce less quantity, charge a higher price, but the most important one is they are creating allocative inefficiency. How do I know it's allocative inefficiency? There was a condition P equals to MC is allocative efficiency. यहाँ पर P is up there and MC is down here. So P is actually greater than MC, तो ये allocative inefficiency कहलाई जाती है. At the quantity where monopoly is basically producing, with obviously the condition that it's a profit maximizing monopoly. ठीक है? And it's creating a deadweight loss. Our next market failure is about the imperfect information. As far as this imperfect information is about, perfect information is that the markets have, consumers have all knowledge as to where the product is, who's selling it, for how much, and how many sellers, everything. And what are the advantages and the disadvantages of those certain products? They are completely aware. And for the producers, even they are aware which customer wants to buy at what price, who else is selling in the market, what's the actual rate for the product, is there any negative production processes, or can we improve the system? They also have all information. But the problem is about the asymmetric information. Consumers and producers have incomplete, imperfect information about things. Okay, like in healthcare system, we say doctors have more information than the patients. That's information failure, simple as that. Sometimes when we go to some people to get our car fixed or something, the mechanic has more information than us, so naturally they can charge a different price as to what you would perceive the cost would be. सो इस तरह से अल्कोहल और टोबैको की भी बात करते हैं, उसके अंदर भी वीव हैड अ डिस्कशन कि ये एक किस्म के डीमेरिट गुड्स हैं, इनके सोसाइटी पे एक हार्मफुल इफेक्ट है, बट कंज्यूमर्स डोंट हैव good enough knowledge. Even though we're trying to solve that problem by advertising and all of that, by labeling and all, but consumers are still consuming it. And we're saying that there is still some sort of lack of information over here, because of which this continues to happen. So एक problem हो गया हमारा information failure का, which needs to be somehow sorted out by the government somehow. Number 4 we want to deal with is that market fails because they do not produce or provide public goods. Now, again, in AS, we had a much more larger discussion on this. So we're just going to carry forward from there. Public goods को 3 categories में तुमको explain करने की ज़रूरत है. Number 1, non-excludable होते हैं public goods. Non-excludable मतलब that you cannot stop anyone from consumption of the good. Once it's provided, obviously. Okay? Cannot stop anyone. Now, the thing with this is, especially we want to see whether a person has paid or not. तो इसका हम example बोलते हैं like street lights The thing with street light is that once the street light has been put, uh, there is no way to stop everyone and charge money. Um, so if that's the case, then we assume that everyone is smart enough to not pay and just hope कि एक दफ़ा स्ट्रीट लाइट्स लग गई तो फिर हम मुफ्त में इस्तेमाल कर लेंगे. And on that note, nobody is going to provide, nobody is going to pay for that good, and eventually it won't be provided in the free market. And so, free market ka failure is that they do not produce public goods. However, if the government can come in, they can collect taxes and then they just can provide it for the society. But over here, because of the non excludability issue and because we assume that everyone is smart enough, we would face a free rider problem. And since nobody is going to pay for it, hoping that we will just free ride on it, the good will never be produced. Second problem, second category for a public good is there should be non rivalry, meaning that if one person consumes it, it should reduce or finish for others. Again, with streetlights, if one car passes by, the thing is, the light, the service of that street light does not reduce or finish for the cars that are coming behind. Okay, so when something is not limited in that sense, then there's never going to be a fight over it. Like chocolate bars, if you consume it, that particular bar is gone. You have to get yourself another one, and those are limited. So obviously there will be some sort of issue with it. And rivalry प्राइवेट गुड्स की एग्जाम्पल में जाता है, नॉन राइवलरी का मतलब हो गया कि ये पब्लिक गुड्स है. The third category, not so important one, but third one is non-rejectable भी होना चाहिए. Again with street lights, once it's provided, a car passing by cannot reject the use of it. They have to use it. They cannot stop. They cannot close it. Okay, so that would be like non-rejectable scenario. So public goods are market failure. Then we talk about how the factors of production like land, labor, capital, enterprise. We say those factors are immobile or factor immobility. There is factor immobility. What does that mean, factor immobility? Let's talk in terms of labor. In a perfect market, we assume कि factors बहुत ही mobile हैं. Factors like natural resources. Natural resources, we assume that they can be easily moved from one industry to the other, and जहाँ पे ज़्यादा उसकी efficiency है, we can just simply move it over there and we can utilize it. But we know कि everywhere, हर जगह हर किस्म की machines नहीं होती, तो certain types of fuels can be used in certain industries and not in all industries. उसी तरह से लेबर की जब हम बात करते हैं तो परफेक्ट मार्केट में, इन लेबर मार्केट वी आर गोइंग टू सी किस तरह से लेबर को वी आर गोइंग टू से दैट इन द परफेक्ट मार्केट दे आर ऑल सिमिलर, होमोजेनस, दे हैव द सेम स्किल सेट. नाउ इन रियलिटी दैट्स नॉट ट्रू. रीज़न बीइंग कि आप बस ड्राइवर को पायलट नहीं बना सकते और पायलट को बस ड्राइवर नहीं बना सकते हो. There is an immobility over there. Occupational immobility कहते हैं इसको. And also at the same time, you can't move the labor from one geographical location to the other for work. And he's not willing to do so because maybe his family is over there, or maybe the better schooling, or he's more acquainted to a particular city and he doesn't want to move. No matter what price no matter what wage you're offering them, they're just not willing to move. So ये factor की immobility है. उसके साथ not only that, but sometimes union comes into existence, and unions also do not allow the market demand and supply forces to operate. तो ये हमारा फैक्टर इमोबिलिटी है जो रियलिटी का एक हिस्सा है, जिसकी वजह से अलग अलग किस्म के प्रॉब्लम्स आ सकते हैं. Number sixth one, which we've already dealt with, but let me place it here in the list. It's the demerit and the merit goods. We've had a pretty large discussion on it, extensive discussion on the basis of externality. The main idea was how demerit goods are over provisioned and merit goods are under provisioned. We're going to talk about the solving this problem and all in just a bit, but these externalities have to be dealt with. Um, and until unless you don't do that, there is a big uh, market failure associated to it. Again, you can go over the notes, it's all from the notes, um, the chapter notes that I've uploaded on the Google Drive. All right, ये तो हो गए हमारे छह किस्म के मार्केट फेलियर्स, बेसिक छह किस्म के मार्केट फेलियर्स. um, Now we're going to talk about how to solve these problems, the correction. And for correction, we will need government's intervention. Okay. Now, when we talk about government interventions, basically we'll say there are three ways in which the government can really intervene. Three kinds of policy, not three types of policies, but like three ways in which these policies would actually have an impact. Number one way, kind of policy that you can have is policies which will using the market system. Matlab, demand and supply forces will keep on playing a role in the market. What you are basically doing is through these certain policies, you are going to alter their behavior. For example, when you have like taxes and subsidies, the equilibrium price and the quantity changes. You're able to alter the behavior of consumers and producers through them. Okay? But demand and supply will continue to operate. Second way is rather than altering the system by moving it through taxes and subsidies, what you can do is you can create certain policies improving the market price. Now we know there are always things which are hindering or making the market system less efficient. So, to make it more efficient, what you can actually do is you can come up with some policies like competition policies. Now, competition, what we know is it improves the demand and supply uh, situation, and the firms they will compete more, and that might result in more demand or more supply. But the firm is not directly affecting the demand and supply. They're doing a back end certain changes and like stuff like reduction of trade restrictions. Okay, now this is going to alter the behavior of the consumers and producers in such a way that they will become more efficient. They will produce the goods which they feel is कि without trade जो बाहर से import आ रहा है, you let that come in, let's move our resources somewhere in a better place, and obviously improvements are going to happen over there. They're not directly involved in changing the demand and supply. And lastly, they can do something extra. What they can go for is some extra market policies. Now, these ones are outside the price mechanism. All right, they're going to work outside the price mechanism domain. For example, it's about why not government provision of public goods themselves. सही है? Or have more state ownership like in public corporations and produce and provide the goods themselves. एक तरीका ये भी है, इसमें डिमांड एंड सप्लाई फ्री मार्केट से आप मूव अवे कर जाते हो और ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा गवर्नमेंट कंट्रोल चीज़ों के ऊपर आ जाते हो. So in these policies, let's deal with our first major one. To correct, let's talk about taxes and subsidies. Now, in order to do that, let me give you some. Let me give you a diagram. In fact, let's do two diagrams. ये असल में मेरिट और डीमेरिट के अंदर we saw this. Okay. So what we had was demand and supply की basis पे, especially marginal private cost and marginal private, this was the quantity the market was producing. Okay. Now, in case of a merit good, let me write it here. This is for the merit good. With merit goods, what we know is that the social benefit is greater than the private benefit, and as a result, from the quantity point of view, we said that the social welfare quantity is greater, and so the market is failing by underproducing this good. Okay, so we're saying how can taxes and subsidy actually help us in avoiding this disequilibrium and taking the equilibrium up to QSW. So, from taxes and subsidies point of view, how about if indirect taxes are lowered on these merit goods? Or subsidies are given to producers. दोनों केसेस में क्या होगा? Well, दोनों केसेस के अंदर the supply is going to increase. So, if supply increases and shifts to the right like this, my equilibrium moves from point A to point B right here, and as a result, my social welfare quantity is achieved. Prices have gone down, quantity demanded has increased for these goods. तो एक तरीका तो ये हो गया कि मेरिट्स के अंदर किस तरीके से तुम मार्केट फेलियर को ख़त्म कर सकते हो, एंड वी आर सेइंग थ्रू आइदर रिड्यूसिंग टैक्सेस, नेगेटिव टैक्सेस, और गिविंग द सब्सिडीज. डीमेरिट के अंदर व्हाट वी हैव लर्नड इज कि क्योंकि उसका सोशल बेनिफिट कम है प्राइवेट बेनिफिट से, उसका सोशल वेलफेयर क्वांटिटी भी कम है, एंड एज अ रिजल्ट देयर इज एन ओवर एलोकेशन बाय द मार्केट, एंड द प्रॉब्लम नीड्स टू बी सॉल्व्ड. Somehow we need to take this equilibrium to social welfare quantity. So the way we are achieving through taxes and subsidies is कि आपने इनडायरेक्ट टैक्सेस इम्पोज कर दिए, okay, you impose this on them. It's a highly improbable situation that they were getting subsidies of some sort. तो demerit के अंदर तो I don't think I can't think of any demerit good which the government is actually giving subsidies for. Okay, so उस केस के अंदर by imposing the indirect taxes, what will you do is that you're going to increase the cost of production and shift the supply curve to the left, and as a result the prices are going to go and equilibrium is going to change from A to B, and as a result the quantities have been reduced. You were able to alter the consumer and producer behavior by raising the price. Consumers are buying less. In the first one, by lowering the price, you encourage the consumers to buy more. So both consumers and producers are altering their behavior while keeping equilibrium and price mechanism to continue playing a role. Now, in this one, make sure कि तुम लोग advantages, disadvantages, taxes or subsidies के just go over the notes. Okay. Second way the government can intervene is through price control. Now, price control sort of like intervenes and spoils the entire price mechanism ka system. Now, let me remind you exactly what price mechanism we were what price controls were. We're talking about minimum and maximum price legislation. Okay, so basically, you have demand, you have supply. Okay, एंड स्पेशली ये उसमें देख लेते हैं मोनोपली के पावर के केस में मोनोपली के केस के अंदर वी कैन यूज प्राइस कंट्रोल स्पेसिफिकली बिकॉज what monopoly is doing is that they are choosing to produce lesser quantity and charge a higher price, exploiting the consumers. What we can do is, especially if it's an important essential item, government can step in and put a P max on it. P max का मतलब है कि the price cannot go above the set price. It can go below, but usually they always impose it below the equilibrium. And when they do that, we can see over here this quantity QM monopoly that was producing, they can't charge anything more than P max. It becomes illegal to charge this price. So until and unless they have an ability to sell it illegally, they might do it. But then again, agar price control lagaya hai, to government will be supervising and enforcing law as to that the prices don't go up. The problem that it created was that itni kam price ke upar producer ki supply capability is only this much, while the consumer's demand is so high, creating a shortage. And this shortage has two problems. Number one, it can give rise to the black market because consumers are willing and able to pay higher prices. Another issue is that only this quantity whoever is able to get will benefit, but all of these people over here, they are basically not benefiting from it. Okay, so maximum price legislation creates a problem of shortage while solving the problem of affordability by the poor specifically. Okay, इसी तरह से minimum को भी कर सकते हो. Now over here you can see that how the quantities have been altered. So it is possible कि किसी तरीके से ये monopolies को रोकने के लिए आप price को affordable बना सकते हो, but again it brings its own problem into the mix. Number 3 solution to the problem is there was a lot of market failure. So if government somehow can provision this information, it can solve a lot of problems. How can they do that? Well, information failure to various किस्म की हो रही थी. For example, merit के अंदर there was lack of information. तो merit goods की तुम कुछ advantages, कुछ फायदे एडवर्टाइजिंग कैंपेन करके और डीमेरिट के नुकसान लोगों को अवेयर कर सकते हो, एंड दैट कैन ऑल्टर हाउ कंज्यूमर कंज्यूम्स दीज मेरिट एंड डीमेरिट गुड्स. दूसरा, फ्रॉम द लेबर पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, क्योंकि लेबर को नहीं पता कहाँ पे कौन सी नौकरी मिल रही है, और मे बी इवन लाइक प्रोड्यूसर्स डोंट नो वेयर टू गेट द बेस्ट लेबर, यू कैन क्रिएट जॉब सेंटर्स. उसके अलावा अभी ये कुछ बातें होती हैं. आई वॉज लिसनिंग ऑन द ये जो आजकल पीडीएम के जलसे चल रहे हैं ऑल दैट, एंड they're coming up and they're talking about all this crappy stuff. Like they actually, these politicians are creating information failure, like stuff like saying that anchors have been fired for taking certain political positionings, and saying things like roti 13 rupees ki ho gayi hai and all that. The thing is, people might believe on that stuff. Why? Because there's information failure. The thing is, they're lying. All anchors are working. Okay, they all have their shows happening. Roti 13 rupees ki, it's not 13 rupees ki. Whether you talk about Punjab or Sindh or whatever, it's relatively low in prices. Different जगहों के ऊपर obviously एक छोटा मोटा जो एक difference आता है, but we're talking of on a wholesome country level के ऊपर. So, these are the kinds of information failures that are there. People don't have these information readily available. We can see how this is happening in Facebook. कोविड के अगेंस्ट पहले जो मिस इन्फॉर्मेशन हो रही थी, फेसबुक डिसाइडेड टू एक्ट लाइक अ गवर्नमेंट एंड इंटरवीन एंड स्टॉप एनी काइंड ऑफ रूमर्स. अब दूसरा मसला आ गया, अब वैक्सीन आ गई हैं, अब उसके अगेंस्ट बातें शुरू हो गई हैं कि वैक्सीन इज़ नॉट इफेक्टिव, वैक्सीन इज़ नॉट सॉल्विंग द प्रॉब्लम, वैक्सीन के कुछ सर्टेन साइड इफेक्ट्स. इनफैक्ट आई वाज जस्ट रीडिंग राइट नाउ, न्यूज़ के ऊपर ही आ रहा था दैट द न्यूज़ वाज समथिंग दैट ये जो फाइजर की वैक्सीन आई है, बिकॉज ऑफ रिएक्शंस, टू पीपल अपेरेंटली हैड सम रिएक्शंस ऑफ द वैक्सीन बिकॉज दे हैड सम ऑलरेडी सम सॉर्ट ऑफ इश्यूज कि उनको ऑलरेडी किसी के कुछ सिम्टम्स थे और समथिंग, एंड व्हेन दे टुक इट देयर वाज अ रिएक्शन. सो बेसिकली द गवर्नमेंट, यूके की गवर्नमेंट ने, they have made this information available that people who have these certain conditions should not take these vaccines. तो अब ये कई किस्म की ये problems आने वाली हैं. So these information failures need to be improved. How government can do that? They can create certain, obviously government की websites हैं. आजकल तो ये ट्विटर आ गया है, तो ट्विटर के ऊपर गवर्नमेंट की नाम से यू कैन कंटिन्यूसली यू कैन हैव दिस इंफॉर्मेशन, but at the same time there's all of these crappy informations in the market as well, so it makes things a lot more difficult. Number 4 is ये जो पब्लिक गुड्स के अंदर एक फेलियर आ रहा था, why not do the direct, और मेरिट गुड्स के अंदर अंडर प्रोडक्शन आ रही थी, why not do direct provisioning of these goods? ओके, डायरेक्ट प्रोविजन का मतलब है कि गवर्नमेंट फर्स्ट हैंड इन्वॉल्व होके खुद प्रोड्यूस करके प्रोडक्ट को मार्केट में अवेलेबल कर रही है. इनडायरेक्ट इज टैक्सेस, सब्सिडीज और दूसरे तरीके से इनकरेज करना प्राइवेट सेक्टर्स को. सो डायरेक्ट प्रोविजन इज them getting themselves down, taking over public corporations, running them, providing these healthcare, making hospitals and doing all of these things by themselves. तो इसमें public goods का भी आता है और merit goods का जो shortfall आता है उसका भी discussion होता है. ठीक है? Now the problem could be that the government might not have enough information as to how to work it, how to provide these goods more effectively and efficiently, and they might actually create inefficiencies in the market. All right. Number 5th type is the government can enforce certain laws prohibiting or regulating behaviors that imposes external cost. What do we mean by that? Costs. What we basically mean by this is we have laws and regulations like indoor smoking ban kar diya, drunk driving ban hai, in different places they come up with different rules and regulations, and if you don't follow, obviously there is going to be some sort of repercussions on it. इससे क्या होता है, इससे गवर्नमेंट बहुत जल्दी डायरेक्टली सर्टेन लॉज अप्लाई कर सकती है और उनको इन्फोर्स भी कर सकती है ऑन अ वेरी क्विक बेसिस. So they work in that way, but obviously at the same time, if you create certain laws and you don't follow it and you don't supervise it effectively, they become bekar. Okay, and then they create their own, people don't take it seriously, as we can see in our traffic situation in our country, that how you always had, like I remember in 2008, 2003, in fact, when I went to for studies abroad, the traffic rules were not as bad as when I came back in 2010. It really felt as if I've entered a country that is going through a war or something, like Iraq would face something like that. It was crazy coming out of the airport. It just seemed all of a sudden traffic rules and all of things doesn't matter anymore, और बस हर कोई अपनी मर्जी से चल रहा है और सिग्नल्स ऐसे ही चल रहे हैं एंड पुलिस भी कुछ नहीं कर सक रही है. So the thing is, this is when you create certain laws and you don't follow up on it, and when you don't follow up on it consistently, any new policies even doesn't matter much. We can see it in our lockdown situation right now. So ये कुछ बातें होती हैं, लॉज और रेगुलेशंस होते हैं, इस ये मार्केट फेलियर्स को ठीक करने के लिए होते हैं, बट इट हैज़ इट्स ओन पॉजिटिव एंड नेगेटिव इफेक्ट्स ऑफ इट. फिर उसके बाद वी टॉक अबाउट सर्टेन थिंग्स लाइक पोल्यूशन परमिट्स. पोल्यूशन जो होती है उसको करने के लिए गेट योर सेल्फ परमिट्स गवर्नमेंट ऑब्वियसली देती है. एंड अगर इंडस्ट्रीज बहुत अच्छा कर रही हैं और डिमांड ज़्यादा होती है, दे वांट टू प्रोड्यूस मोर, दैट मीन्स दे विल हैव टू पोल्यूट मोर. और फिर अनफॉर्चुनेटली एज अ रिजल्ट ऑफ दिस दे विल हैव टू गो एंड बाय these permits which are going to be expensive. When they become expensive, the cost goes up, and as a result they will produce lesser quantities. Or on the other hand, they're going to be at least encouraged to find newer ways somehow that they reduce pollution and produce more quantities. राइट. सो इट्स वर्किंग इन बोथ पॉजिटिव वेज. एक तरफ डिस्करेज भी कर रहा है, दूसरी तरफ ऑल्टरनेटिव्स की तरफ आपको पुश करने की कोशिश भी कर रहा है. सो इन दैट वे इट्स अ प्रीटी गुड थिंग टू हैव पोल्यूशन परमिट्स.